there's so much to know that you don't know. And I always found this to be something about filmmaking. No matter what the technology is, you shouldn't be cowed by the technology. You shouldn't be cowed by the process, in a sense. You should have the kind of passion and bravery and ignorance, I think, to a certain extent, of wanting to get something done. You know, because if you really thought about making a picture, if you really thought about it step by step, you never do it. It's always a situation where you wind up like 3 days into shooting or so, or 2 days, and you say, what have I done? What was I thinking? But you have to do it. When it came to light, I never really understood light. I still really don't. I don't really need to, I don't think. I never really became something that was prominent in designing scenes. And I think a lot of that had to do, it took me years to understand, a lot of that had to do where I grew up. I grew up in actually the tenements and on Elizabeth Street in the late 40s or through the 50s into the 60s. And basically all I needed to know there was daylight and night. Yeah, I didn't really, it was dark, it was dark. There was maybe a light bulb in a hallway. Yeah. It wasn't complaining about any deprivation of nature's beauty. It was where you were. And it had its own beauty, you know. Yes, there's a nuance that I did learn. In a daylight situation, there could be clouds and there could be sun. I got that. But aside from that, where the sun is and where things to be shot at a certain time of day, I really don't, I still don't know. I still don't know. Maybe that's why I like a lot of British cinematographers too, because of the overcast in their country. But in any event, I learned to work very closely with the directors of photography over the years, and in designing the shots. They would add the element of light. I would change, I would work it. I began to understand something about it. And so this is something that I think can be, if not learned, can be coexist with the necessity of making the film. You deal with it. If you don't know something, ask, try it. You know, learn as much. You may forget afterwards, but you learn a little bit each time, a little more. But it's something that shouldn't stop you. If there are certain elements of the actual production, or how to get an image on screen, or how to tell a story, you'll find your way through. Freddie's work I had seen as a cinematographer, but also he was the camera operator on Tales of Hoffman and a couple of other films of Paul Pressburger. So we came out of that group and got to know him a bit. I was there the night he won the Academy Award for Glory, and said he was looking for a job. And so I thought of possibly working with him on this film Cape Fear, which was a film I hadn't planned to make, and was an attempt at trying to make or extend or enrich a genre, so to speak, or revise a genre, possibly. I don't know. But in any event, Freddie agreed to do it, and Freddie had a set of 5 lenses that he used. On The Innocents, for example, I think on Sons and Lovers, I'm not quite sure, but it must have been. But in any event, certainly The Innocents, which is a beautiful film that Jack Clayton directed, based on Turn of the Screw, Henry James, Deborah Carr. Extraordinary focus in the film, in black and white scope, black and white anamorphic, but extraordinary deep focal length in this picture. And there's Deborah Carr walking through the halls of this Victorian house, dark, and she's wearing a black dress, which is very full, but everything's in crisp focus. And I asked him, how did he achieve that? And he said he shot at f11, which meant that it was the smallest opening. And that means he had to pump in more light. And I didn't fully understand this until later on Cape Fear, when I would ask for certain scenes to be even more focused in terms of the characters. this character in focus with that one and this one. He said, he would always tell me, well, I think I can give you what you want if you give me a few moments, which we did. And that's when I fully understood the impact of the intensity of light to focus of the screen and focus of the image. Imagine Greg Toland in Best Years of Our Lives, A Citizen Kane. All that deep focal length work must have incorporated extraordinary lighting, the heat of the lighting, the intensity. And I mean, naturally, you're talking to somebody here who I'm speaking from a different experience. The impulse for me to make movies was the New York independent cinema, Cassavetes, Shirley Clark. Very often, a number of people who did those films, I think Baird Bryant shot Cool World. Very often we're using available light. This was inspired from the French New Wave, that sort of thing. Available light isn't always available light, by the way. There's always some fill or something like that. But in any event, it was lighter equipment. I didn't understand the necessity of arc lights and the power of the heat for focus. And so on Cape Fear, that was a revelation. He had a sense of transforming the image. There was a moment in other words, a shot of an eye, I would say, a shot of two eyes, person looking. There's a shot of two eyes, unless you interpret it. At one point, I remember very clearly, I had designed this action sequence at the end of the film in a storm at Cape Fear, the actual Cape Fear. Boats are flying around, houseboats and that sort of thing. But prior to the boat breaking, there's Nick Nolte staring through the window, through Venetian blinds, of a storm-tossed houseboat of his wife, played by Jessica Lange, being terrorized by Robert De Niro's Max Cady. And I said, he's out there, he's looking through the window, there's Venetian blinds, we're on the eyes, and there's rain hitting the window, so it's streaking, and that sort of thing. And we lined up the shot in anamorphic, and two eyes. And I told Freddie, it doesn't feel right. It's just a shot of two eyes looking through a window. And so he said, one eye. I said, what do you mean? He said, just show one eye. When he did that, it took on some other aspect, and that is that it was like something from the ocean depths. When you didn't quite know what it was at first, and you realize it's an eye, covered with raindrops, covered with shadow, light, all kinds of things, so that it created a mystery, an understanding of how to tell a story with pictures that was extraordinary for that mood and tone. And from the one eye we tracked out, I believe. But this is the kind of thing, it was really kind of a learning experience for me. And I also kind of bothered him a lot because I would ask him about how he shot certain things in his films and then say, well, we have to get going. And he goes, well, if you give me a few minutes and stop asking me questions, I could work. So, but he was extremely gentlemanly about it. And it reminds me of the story, and I've just been telling some people about this for a while now, but he was the camera operator on this valiant effort to do a version of Moby Dick that John Huston did in 1956. But on that film, Freddie was a camera operator, and he was told at one point by Huston to go and get a few shots of whales in the North Sea. And obviously sending to the spot where the whales are and the fins come up and that sort of thing. And, 3-script Technicolor, big camera. And he brought it back, he went there, shot it, brought it back to London. They screened it. And he looked at Huston, and Huston said, well, it's a shot of a whale. Right, it had very little interpretation. And so this is the lesson I learned. It's simply saying, okay, we're going to get a shot of the door, or we're going to get a shot of the car. Well, what's the angle? What's the light? Is it moving? Is it not moving? I've seen that sometimes where I start to work on an image of a telephone, for example. Infinite amount of ways to do that. I'm talking about a landline. Infinite amount of ways. And it needs a lot of thought, you know, which leads to the use of inserts, which leads to Bresson and Hitchcock and a number of others. But with Freddie, it was a very, very interesting experience because it took me to the old pros, in a way, as opposed to other directors of photography I'd been working with up to that time. Not to say that one was superior to the other. It's a different thing.